He's the top plastic surgeon in South Korea. While not everyone he operates on becomes an instant celebrity, his work significantly boosts their confidence. His exceptional skills have drawn endless appointments from people hoping to enhance their looks. Logically, he should be incredibly wealthy. However, Dr. Jung-woo follows an unwritten rule. One day, a father came in claiming his daughter had been severely burned by hot water while bathing, leaving her face badly scarred, but her hands remained untouched. Jung-woo immediately saw through the lie, knowing that instinctively, anyone would use their hands to shield themselves from scalding water. Without revealing his reasoning, he refused the procedure, citing his policy against performing reconstructive surgeries. Furious, the father caused a scene at the front desk, accusing the doctor of looking down on him because of his financial situation and threatening to destroy the hospital. Luckily, the medical team intervened before things escalated further. Still bitter, the father exaggerated the incident to the media, leading to a decline in the hospital's clientele for several days. 2 days later, a young woman cautiously approached the front desk, urgently requesting a consultation. Jung-woo was curious about what kind of procedure she needed so desperately. To his surprise, she wanted to change her entire appearance. Though she had naturally beautiful double eyelids and perfect lips, her expression was unsettling. He advised her to reconsider, telling her she could always come back if she truly felt the need to change. After the consultation, she took the elevator down, but an eerie feeling crept over her, as if someone was watching her. The feeling followed her to the underground parking lot. Suddenly, a voice called out to her, and a man emerged, laughing hysterically upon seeing her. Shortly after, the hospital director approached Jung-woo, informing him of an emergency case, a patient in desperate need of surgery. The girl had suffered multiple unexplained fractures to her cheekbone and eye socket, along with severe tears on the right side of her face. Immediate reconstructive surgery was required. Without hesitation, Jung-woo refused, as such operations in South Korea are typically handled by specialized surgeons. However, after persistent pleas from the director and seeing the severity of her injuries, he ultimately agreed. Before the surgery, Jung-woo examined her wounds and theorized that the fractures had occurred after an initial blow, followed by a second attack that forced the bones against her eye muscles. This meant foreign objects lodged in her eye socket had to be removed before he could reconstruct the damaged bones. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the scene, but found no substantial evidence apart from shattered glass fragments. The parking lot surveillance cameras had been obstructed by parked cars, capturing no footage of the attack. The man involved filed a medical report, claiming the girl had attacked him first. With no concrete proof, authorities ruled it a mutual fight. Determined to expose the man's lies, investigator Min Hyung approached Jung-woo, asking if he could provide an expert statement proving the girl's injuries resulted from a second attack indicating premeditation. To his surprise, Jung-woo immediately declined, citing patient confidentiality. At that moment, the girl's drunken father stormed into the office, yelling that Jung-woo was an unfit doctor. He accused him of rejecting his daughter's treatment simply because they were poor, blaming him for her running away from home. Before he could say more, the hospital's part-time doctor and security team removed him from the premises. This incident made Min Hyung see Jung-woo in a different light. Later that afternoon, due to a lack of evidence, the attacker was acquitted. Enraged, he grabbed his lawyer by the face, furious over the time he had spent in custody. Just as he was about to lash out, Min Hyung intercepted him and noticed a tracking device on his phone. 3 days later, the girl was discharged from the hospital. As soon as she opened her car door, the attacker suddenly appeared, shoving her inside before speeding off from the underground parking lot. Min Hyung, who was still investigating the case, saw what happened and quickly tried to follow, but another car blocked her at the intersection. By chance, Jung-woo was driving home at that exact moment. She hurriedly explained the situation, and the two took off in pursuit of the vehicle. Meanwhile, throughout the drive, the girl intentionally provoked the attacker, causing him to lose his patience, unaware that his arrogant behavior was being recorded. Eventually, Jung-woo forced the car to stop. Seizing the opportunity, Min Hyung smashed the car window and arrested the man on charges of kidnapping, unlawful detention, and assault. A tracking device was found in the back of the vehicle, bringing the stalking and assault case to a close. That evening, a man fell from a building in a residential complex. He was later identified as the same father who had caused a scene at the hospital. Inside his pocket, Min Hyung found what appeared to be a suicide note filled with insults aimed at Jung-woo. Strangely, The daughter seemed indifferent to her father's mysterious death, merely hoping the police would classify it as a suicide without further investigation. However, during their inquiry, detectives discovered inconsistencies. There were no foreign fingerprints on the balcony railing or windows, no signs of a struggle in the apartment, and no traces of blood. Despite this, Min Hyung noticed that every date on the father's calendar was marked with the name of a location. A quick search revealed that all these places were well-known plastic surgery hospitals, with the last scheduled visit set for the end of the month. Adding to the mystery, the father's polished dress shoes and a freshly dry-cleaned suit hanging on the wall seemed out of place. Based on the evidence, it appeared that the father had been desperately seeking a hospital willing to treat his daughter's scars, persistently inquiring even after being turned away. However, it was unclear why he would take his own life, especially after finally securing an appointment. Soon, the news covered the apparent suicide and published the contents of the note, placing all blame on Jung-woo. Misled by the reports, patients began canceling their appointments, leading to a steep decline in the hospital's business. Meanwhile, after completing her statement at the police station, the daughter received the autopsy report. It confirmed that her father had died from multiple open fractures, causing severe organ damage. Additionally, the report revealed he had been suffering from lung cancer. The police captain speculated that, unable to afford surgery for his daughter, the father had been overwhelmed with guilt, ultimately leading him to take his own life. As a result, he advised closing the case as a suicide. Min Hyung later approached the daughter, hoping to gather more information. However, she revealed that her father was the one responsible for her facial injuries. Her mother had left years ago, and in a drunken state, her father had made a mistake that permanently ruined her life. She saw no reason for him to feel guilty now, and at this point, with the media already exposing her private life, she had no interest in reopening the case. She asked Min Hyung to drop it, fearing any further investigation would only bring more unwanted attention. Meanwhile, a lawyer friend picked up Jung-woo in his car, warning him that while he might not face criminal charges, he wouldn't be able to escape public scrutiny. He assured Jung-woo that if he ever needed legal assistance, he shouldn't hesitate to reach out. Back at the hospital, in an effort to mitigate the growing public backlash, the director held a press conference. As a humanitarian gesture, the hospital announced they would offer free reconstructive surgery for the girl. Additionally, Jung-woo would perform 3 special procedures as part of a social welfare initiative. That afternoon, the police received an urgent report of a woman being assaulted in the restroom of an internet cafe. The suspect had suffered a deep 12-centimeter slash across his face from a dagger. Upon hearing the report, Min Hyung immediately arrived at the scene. The victim and her boyfriend were still inside the cubicle. According to the boyfriend, they had been playing games at the cafe when he noticed a man pretending to clean while staring at his girlfriend's legs. Initially, he dismissed it as nothing. However, when his girlfriend went to the restroom, the man followed her. Sensing something was off, the boyfriend trailed behind and arrived just in time to hear her scream. As he forced open the door, he found his girlfriend standing there, holding a dagger with a tense expression, while the suspect sat on the floor, injured. Min Hyung suggested that they go to the hospital to collect forensic evidence. Meanwhile, the suspect was taken to Jung-woo's hospital, where he acted strangely obsessed with the possibility of scarring and nervously fidgeting with the buttons on his clothing. Jung-woo took notice but, out of respect for patient confidentiality, chose not to comment. Later, as the boyfriend and his girlfriend were finishing up the evidence collection, he happened to notice a few drops of blood on his shoes. Without hesitation, he preserved them as potential evidence. Shortly after, Min Hyung arrived at the hospital, where Jung-woo informed her that the suspect required immediate surgery. It was revealed that the individual was biologically female and had undergone breast implant surgery 3 weeks earlier. However, the surgical site had developed a severe infection, posing a life-threatening risk if not treated promptly. This meant the couple had been lying. Meanwhile, someone deliberately spread details of the alleged molestation incident at the internet cafe online. Netizens immediately turned against the cafe manager, calling him scum and even accusing him of being a repeat offender. Under pressure from public opinion, the police captain wanted to wrap up the case quickly and ordered that the suspect be transferred from the hospital back to the station. Just as they were about to leave, Jung-woo stopped them. Based on the depth and direction of the wound, which slanted from top to bottom, he deduced that the attacker had to be taller than the cafe manager. Otherwise, the wound would have been angled from bottom to top. At the same time, the police had detained the boyfriend. Min Hyung had discovered blood stains on his shoe stains with an elliptical tail, known as cast-off blood spatter. These are dynamic blood stains that form when blood is flung from a moving weapon onto a stationary surface, indicating that the boyfriend was the one who had actually injured the cafe manager. It turned out that, while the couple was playing a game, the boyfriend accidentally spilled his drink. When the manager came over to clean it, the boyfriend's game character died, leading to an argument. At the same time, the girlfriend had gone to the restroom. Since the manager was biologically female, she was hesitant about others knowing and was waiting outside. The enraged boyfriend then shoved her inside and assaulted her. Together, the couple staged the entire molestation scene to frame the manager. In the end, Min Hyung arrested them both for aggravated assault and false accusations. That night, a breakthrough came when the niece of the man who had fallen to his death provided a crucial clue. On the night of the incident, she had seen a suspicious man, but due to the darkness, she couldn't make out his face. However, she did notice something sticky on the soles of his shoes. Min Hyung quickly realized that this was why no footprints or traces had been left at the scene, leading her to suspect that the man's death was not a suicide. At the same time, she couldn't understand why the killer had gone out of his way to implicate Jung-woo. Meanwhile, as Jung-woo was arriving at his apartment, a car suddenly sped toward him. Just before the black vehicle could hit him, Min Hyung driving a white sedan swerved between them, forcing the other driver to veer off and preventing a potential crash. An hour earlier, Min Hyung had noticed the black car tailing Jung-woo. The driver, wearing a mask and a cap, bore a strong resemblance to the mysterious figure involved in the earlier case of the fatal fall. Without hesitation, she began following the vehicle. Along the way, she discreetly asked a colleague to run the license plate. The results confirmed that the black car had been reported stolen just days earlier. Before she could process this information, the car suddenly accelerated toward Jung-woo. Fortunately, her quick reflexes prevented what could have been a fatal accident. The next day, the annual TV station modeling contest kicked off. After an intense competition, 8 contestants showcased their best performances and secured spots in the finals. On the final day of recording, one of the contestants, Hyung, not only received high praise from the director, but also appeared unusually close to him, causing resentment among the other competitors. Rumors had long circulated that Hyung had been dropped by her agency due to past misconduct, so her apparent relationship with the director wasn't particularly shocking. Later that afternoon, right after filming wrapped up, Hyung was suddenly attacked with sulfuric acid by a woman who had approached her. Screaming in pain, she collapsed as bystanders quickly restrained the attacker. However, during police questioning, the woman remained eerily indifferent. She muttered that she was a maid who had recently been fired by her employer and had simply been on her way to the park because the weather was nice. She insisted she didn't know Hyung and kept asking the officers about someone wearing red clothing. Meanwhile, forensic analysts determined that surveillance footage alone wasn't enough to confirm whether the car thief and the suspect in the earlier fatal fall were the same person. While driving, Jung-woo received a call from Dr. Park's mother, who was confused as to why the hospital director had assigned him to perform reconstructive surgery. In reality, the director had no choice. He was trying to calm the public backlash. The father, who had recently been released from prison, only wanted to arrange surgery for his daughter, who had suffered severe burns. Park's mother was shocked to hear this because she knew the father who had fallen to his death. Meanwhile, after undergoing emergency treatment, Hyung was left with second-degree burns on the left side of her face. Since she had previously undergone cheekbone augmentation, doctors recommended that she seek treatment at a plastic surgery clinic. Frustrated, she struggled to understand why she had been attacked with acid by a woman she had never even met. During their conversation, Min Hyung noticed that Hyung frequently shared updates about her whereabouts on social media. She was then transferred to a plastic surgery clinic. Given the risk of infection due to her cheekbone implants, Jung-woo advised her to undergo reconstructive surgery as soon as possible. However, Hyung became highly distressed upon learning that she would have permanent scars. After a day of investigation and employee testimony, police were fairly confident that the elderly woman's attack was not premeditated. However, Min Hyung wasn't convinced. Relying solely on the old woman's testimony made the conclusion seem weak, especially considering how openly Hyung shared her location online. Anyone could have tracked her movements. That night, the elderly woman asked the police to help her find her husband. It turned out that earlier that day, he had run off with another woman wearing a bright red dress, making it seem as if Hyung was being mistaken for a homewrecker. As the situation escalated, dishonest bloggers twisted the story into a dramatic scandal about a wife attacking her husband's mistress. The police soon located the old woman's husband, who insisted that he had never met Hyung. However, he had a reputation for being flirtatious. He also revealed that his wife often followed him in secret, likely due to a mental illness. However, when police checked, they found no medical records related to her mental health. Surprisingly, the husband admitted that his wife had indeed undergone psychiatric treatment, but since having an official record could be used against her in a divorce, she had used a friend's name during her consultations. Soon after, police confirmed that the woman suffered from depression, delusional disorder, and mental exhaustion. Since this was her first offense, she was unlikely to face detention. Something about the situation felt off to Min Hyung. The woman had brought up her husband at just the right moment without even being asked and quickly provided a motive for the attack. It was as if something was deliberately influencing the direction of the investigation. Suspicious, Min Hyung decided to dig deeper into other recent acid attack cases, believing there was a hidden motive at play. The scene shifts. The elderly woman is acquitted. However, as she was leaving, Min Hyung intercepted her and handed her a photo of a victim from a previous acid attack case. Just as the woman was about to walk away, Min Hyung casually pretended to make a phone call, loudly mentioning Hyung's current situation at the plastic surgery clinic. The old woman took the bait. That night, she dismissed her defense attorney and secretly made her way to Jungwoo's plastic surgery clinic. Without hesitation, she entered Hyung's hospital room and immediately pulled out her phone, snapping multiple photos of the patient in bed. Unbeknownst to her, all of her actions were being monitored and recorded by Min Hyung. As she left the hospital, she made repeated calls to another woman. Meanwhile, Hyung, deeply distressed, stood at the edge of the hospital rooftop. Her mind drifted to the past, back to her prime, when she was admired for her beauty and charm during competitions. She recalled an incident where a third-tier model had accidentally bumped into the chairman, a man notorious for exploiting his power to coerce female subordinates. After much deliberation, Hyung had made the difficult decision to secretly record evidence and report him to the authorities. However, she hadn't anticipated the high price of refusing to be a silent bystander. Elsewhere, as Jungwoo was driving home, he suddenly recalled how unstable Hyung had been when she was first admitted to the hospital after being disfigured. Yet, in her recent interactions with the police, she had seemed eerily composed. A sense of unease crept over him. Trusting his instincts, he immediately turned his car around and raced back to the hospital just in time to pull Hyung back from the rooftop's edge. She was about to take her own life. Meanwhile, Min Hyung followed the elderly woman who had thrown acid to a luxury apartment complex. Earlier that day, she had intentionally shown a photo of another victim to the woman, provoking a strong reaction. This confirmed that the elderly woman had no personal connection to Hyung. She simply needed to verify in the hospital room that she had completed the job before collecting her payment from the mastermind, using the photo as proof. Everything played out just as Min Hyung expected. The elderly woman entered the upscale residence of CEO Yoonha, the wife of an entertainment company chairman. With an air of contempt, Yoonha told her to take the money and leave. However, the elderly woman remained unfazed. Calmly, she picked up a steaming cup of tea from the table. Yoonha shrieked and instinctively covered her head in fear. Seeing her reaction, the elderly woman let out a mocking laugh, amused that simply pretending to be unhinged and holding a cup of liquid could make someone panic. This subtle but clear threat implied that she could use the same tactic against Yoonha. Yoonha, no fool, immediately recognized the threat. She quickly dropped her arrogant demeanor and replaced it with one of reluctant respect. In reality, the elderly woman was using this moment to manipulate her into giving her even more money. Meanwhile, the police retrieved dashcam footage from the taxi the elderly woman had taken, capturing her leaving the apartment with a large bag of cash. This suggested a financial transaction between her and Yoonha, though there was no solid evidence yet. As a result, authorities decided to closely monitor the elderly woman's financial activity. Soon, a colleague uncovered that she was a regular visitor at a plastic surgery clinic, frequently attending consultations. The case took another step forward the following afternoon when Min Hyung confronted a middle-aged man outside Hyung's hospital room. The man explained that his daughter had been close friends with Hyung, and the two had worked at the same entertainment company a year ago. The company's chairman, Kim Ji-hyuk, was now serving a prison sentence. He strongly believed the acid attack was connected to his daughter's death. Min Hyung relayed this information to Hyung, revealing that her friend had taken her own life the previous year due to Kim's misconduct. The news deeply affected Hyung. Once she had gathered her thoughts, she finally shared the truth. That afternoon, Min Hyung's colleague legally arrested the elderly woman, while Min Hyung and her team prevented Yoonha from leaving her residence. During interrogation, the elderly woman confessed everything. The true mastermind behind the acid attack was none other than Kim, orchestrating everything from prison. He had relayed his plan through letters to his wife, Yoonha, who then hired someone to carry it out for a high price. However, Yoonha saw nothing wrong with her actions. To her, powerful men in business sometimes made small mistakes. She viewed Hyung's involvement as unrelated to the real issue. Hyung had merely reported Kim's misconduct, causing him to explode in fury behind bars. As punishment, he had arranged for her to be taught a lesson. Min Hyung firmly warned Yoonha that justice would be served, officially closing the acid attack case. Hyung's name was cleared online, but her disfigured face remained a permanent reminder of what had been taken from her. Yet, another question remained. Who would avenge her late friend? As she sat in her hospital bed, Hyung couldn't shake the memory of her friend's helpless eyes after being assaulted or the grotesque smirk of the man responsible. Pocket, where a pair of surgical scissors rested. In that moment, she made a decision. She would take justice into her own hands. She would kill the monstrous chairman. Just as she was about to act, Jung-woo appeared. Without hesitation, he warned her against using the scissors, explaining that they were simply dressing forceps used for handling gauze during bandage changes. More importantly, he reminded her that true revenge wasn't about reckless violence, it was about not letting the perpetrator destroy her life. He urged her to stop wasting her future on meaningless revenge and instead focus on her recovery through a skin transplant. A day later, Hyung agreed to undergo the procedure. Soon after, she competed in the final round of a prestigious modeling competition. She knew she could never return to the way she once looked, but quitting entirely would mean allowing her attackers to control her life. However, reality was no fairy tale. Society remained obsessed with appearances, and she failed to place in the competition. That evening, as Jung-woo was leaving work, he noticed someone watching him through his car window. Without hesitation, he began to follow. By chance, Min Hyung spotted him and immediately joined the pursuit. But before they could catch up, the mysterious figure vanished from sight. Just then, the person suddenly called out to Min Hyung and calmly walked toward her, removing their mask. Face to face, Min Hyung was stunned. She immediately recognized the mysterious figure. On her first day with the patrol unit, Min Hyung had expected a straightforward job. But that illusion was shattered when a sudden murder case required immediate support. It was her first time handling such a case, and she was overwhelmed with confusion. However, when she saw the murderer's face, she had to make a choice to turn a blind eye. Despite the man insisting he was innocent, fingerprints and hair found in the victim's room were enough evidence to convict him, even without any witnesses. Years later, after her brother was released from prison, they crossed paths again. Without hesitation, he shamelessly blamed a doctor for ruining his life. He argued that, if it weren't for the media exposure, he wouldn't have been caught in a public scandal. Min Hyung, however, refused to entertain his endless excuses. Committing a crime doesn't always lead to remorse. Just as she was about to handcuff him, her brother, looking pale, said he still had unfinished business. Shortly after he left, Jung-woo arrived to check if Min Hyung was okay and asked if she had seen the man's face. Knowing her brother harbored a deep grudge against Jung-woo, she hesitated to say much. Meanwhile, a delivery man arrived a few minutes late and was mistakenly identified as the murderer. According to the victim's family, the delivery man was provoked into entering the house when she accidentally dropped the payment money on the floor. A confrontation ensued with her cousin, leading to a broken mirror and glass shards cutting the cousin's face. The delivery man claimed the injury had already been there when he arrived, arguing that he was being framed as an easy target. Earlier that day, Min Hyung had shared an elevator with him and overheard him threatening someone over an unpaid delivery, saying they would end up half alive. When she later followed the sounds of commotion, she saw him looking nervous before he fled the scene, leaving his helmet behind. The key issue, however, was that the delivery man had a prior criminal record for breaking into residences and assault. He was still on probation. Despite his claims of innocence, all evidence pointed to him, which under regulations allowed authorities to issue a preemptive arrest warrant. Meanwhile, the victim was taken to Jung-woo's hospital for surgery. His injuries weren't severe, except for a fractured earlobe and a deeper cut near his chin, which appeared to have been caused by a different impact. The boy recalled the situation as chaotic and struggled to remember details, but his cousin remembered everything clearly. When Jung-woo stepped out of the operating room, the cousin rushed to ask if paramedics had mishandled her cousin's face during transport, worsening the wounds. Although she seemed deeply concerned, she grew anxious when she learned the ear surgery had to be postponed until the next day. She even tried persuading Jung-woo to stitch it up immediately. However, he explained that cartilage from the other ear was needed to repair the damage, and she eventually stopped insisting on discharging him early. The next day, Min-hyung returned to question the victim. His statements matched his cousin's, with no major inconsistencies. However, she noticed bruises on his wrists. When asked, he once again said the chaos made it difficult to recall details. Likewise, his cousin, who had been waiting outside, anxiously inquired about the delivery man's situation, fearing he might come after them again. When Min-hyung informed her that an arrest warrant had already been approved, the cousin finally sighed in relief. Following protocol, Min-hyung spoke with the attending physician, Jung-woo, who mentioned a fragment removed from the victim's chin. He described the wound as unusually deep compared to the others, with a different shape and trajectory and a regular, jagged cut, suggesting it had been caused by someone else. Just then, the boy entered, asking about his surgery, but his gaze locked onto the fragment in Min-hyung's hand. With Jung-woo's observations in mind, Min-hyung grew suspicious. Even though the delivery man's arrest warrant had been issued, she arranged for her colleagues to reinvestigate the cousin's connections and return to the crime scene. There, they retrieved a pair of slippers with fragments and bloodstains, sending them to the forensic lab for analysis. Meanwhile, Min-hyung's colleagues contacted the boy's father, who stated that his son wasn't allowed to use his phone at the boarding tutorial center, and they hadn't spoken in a while. He also mentioned that they had no relatives living in Seoul and noted that his son had switched to online classes some time ago, raising further doubts. Just as a colleague was about to update Min-hyung, her phone became unreachable. Jung-woo also failed to contact her and soon made a disturbing discovery. After performing surgery on the boy, he noticed another patient acting suspiciously near the hospital entrance, someone who seemed to recognize the so-called cousins. At first, he didn't give it much thought. However, later, he discovered a listening device hidden in his office. Alarmed, he rushed to check on the boy's hospital room, only to find that he had already been discharged. That's when he realized something was seriously wrong with the two cousins. Jung-woo then spoke with the patient he had seen earlier and learned that both the patient and the boy had attended the same high school. The so-called cousin, however, was not actually his relative. She was a teacher who had once interned at their school. This revelation meant that they weren't family at all, but rather a teacher and a student with an unusual relationship. Rumors had spread that the female teacher came from a prestigious family, so people only dared to talk behind her back. However, one student couldn't resist exposing her inappropriate relationship with the boy. Shortly afterward, he suddenly died by suicide, jumping off the roof of a commercial building near the school. There was speculation that he had been lured to the rooftop and pushed. Jung-woo soon learned from the police that Min-hyung had gone to check on the so-called cousin's home. A bad feeling crept over him. At the same time, Min-hyung arrived at the woman's house. At first, the woman admitted that she had given a false statement under pressure. She confessed that she had known and dated the young man before. On the night of the incident, she had tried to break up with him, but he reacted by threatening to release a private video of them. In desperation, she had pleaded with him, even falling to her knees. As he tried to push her away, he lost his balance and crashed into a glass panel. At that moment, a delivery man happened to arrive. Seizing the opportunity, she blamed him for the incident to avoid any suspicion falling on her. She feared that, if the truth came out, it would ruin her chances of passing a government employment exam. Since the young man wasn't at her house, she felt safe confessing all this to Min-hyung. However, just as Min-hyung was about to take her to the police station to give an official statement, the woman suddenly turned aggressive. That's when the young man appeared out of nowhere and knocked Min-hyung unconscious. Pretending to be unsure of what to do, the woman had already made up her mind. She went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and forced it into the young man's hand, ordering him to kill Min-hyung. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Jung-woo. But even his arrival didn't deter her. Instead, she slapped the trembling young man and urged him to be brave, coldly remarking that this wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Under the teacher's pressure, the young man finally acted. He picked up the knife and slowly advanced toward Min Hyung. However, she had regained consciousness just in time and managed to grab his hands. At that moment, Jung-woo broke through the door. Realizing that the situation was turning against her, the woman immediately changed her demeanor. She pretended to be disappointed in the young man, putting on an innocent act and seeking protection behind Jung-woo. The young man, overwhelmed by everything, completely broke down. He screamed, tore himself free from Min Hyung, and ran out of the house, haunted by the teacher's influence. The woman tried to argue her case, but she didn't realize that Min Hyung had recorded their conversation. When Min Hyung had first entered the house, a colleague had called her, and she had left the phone in her pocket, knowingly capturing the woman's confession. As the truth unraveled, it became clear that the young man's past was far darker than expected. A while back, he had once glanced at a girl on TV, which had sent the teacher into a jealous rage. She had held onto a laptop containing evidence of the young man's past crimes and decided to take it to the police. He had pleaded desperately with her, but she remained unmoved. During their struggle, he had crashed into a mirror, and shards of glass had cut his face. A long piece of glass had embedded itself in his chin. Still furious, the teacher had stepped on the shard, driving it even deeper into his skin. The full truth was now clear. The young man had met the woman when she was interning at a tutoring center during his high school years. They had started dating, but after rumors spread, they committed murder to keep their secret hidden. Over time, the woman had gradually isolated the young man from society, cutting him off from all social contact and essentially imprisoning him in her home. She had used evidence of their past crime and years of psychological manipulation to make him completely dependent on her, both mentally and physically. But the most chilling revelation was that the buttons on the young man's shirt were, in fact, listening devices. She had been controlling him through earphones, keeping him under her influence at all times. With the real culprit caught, the delivery man was finally released. Not only was he innocent, but he had been a victim himself, wrongly accused and harshly scolded by the woman. Frustrated and angry, he vented his resentment on Min Hyung, who had initially ignored his pleas of innocence. Despite his criminal record, she now felt guilty for not believing him. This also led her to question her own brother's case. Was he, too, a victim of a wrongful conviction simply because of his past? Min Hyung restarted the investigation by first obtaining his brother's address from their mother. He then retrieved taxi surveillance footage from outside the prison, which confirmed that his brother had indeed visited the victim's home on the night of his death. Unfortunately, after reaching out to the police in his brother's jurisdiction, Min Hyung learned that he no longer lived at the registered address. His search had hit a dead end. That night, feeling discouraged, Min Hyung stopped by his usual street food stall for a meal. Unexpectedly, he ran into Jung-woo. As they talked, Min Hyung subtly probed Jung-woo for information and learned that his search for his brother wasn't motivated by revenge, but by guilt. He believed he had indirectly caused his father's death by falling. This revelation made Min Hyung feel even more remorseful toward this good man. He downed half a beer in one gulp, silently vowing to help Jung-woo uncover the truth. For a brief moment, Jung-woo seemed lost and thought his late fiancée had also always left her glass half full. Then, something even more unsettling happened. Someone had spray-painted "murderer you know" on Jung's car. Right at that moment, he received a call from a lawyer who had discovered that his brother had been paroled last month. The lawyer also revealed that his brother had a sister who was a police officer, and now, that very sister was determined to bring justice against him. Among the belongings left behind by their father, Min Hyung found a keychain that read Benevolent Hands Medical Association, of a volunteer group of doctors who provided medical care for prisoners. Both their father and brother had been incarcerated at the same prison, leading to intertwined lives. Soon, using their respective networks, Min Hyung and Jung-woo tracked down the brother's actual address. They happened to cross paths with him by chance, from his initial arrest to the spray painting on Jung's car after his release. Despite everything, the brother had always denied committing murder. Jung-woo wanted to investigate whether there was more to the case. Unfortunately, when they arrived at his place, he wasn't home. To make matters worse, the hospital called Jung-woo back, forcing them to leave empty-handed. Meanwhile, Min Hyung had the keychain tested, but the forensic technician had initially handled it as a regular item, wiping away any other fingerprints. Fortunately, Min Hyung was able to trace the Benevolent Hands Medical Association back to its founder. During the investigation, the founder became emotional upon seeing the photo Min Hyung provided because the man in the picture was her son. In a shocking revelation, Min Hyung realized the founder was none other than Jung's mother. Quickly ending the inquiry, he left in a hurry. As night fell, Jung-woo, still seeking the truth, returned to his brother's house. Breaking in, he was stunned to find the walls covered with photos and case files including one of Min Hyung. In that instant, Jung-woo pieced everything together. He finally understood why Min Hyung had been avoiding him. Just then, Min Hyung received a distress message from a girl in the neighborhood, the same girl who had seen a masked man acting suspiciously on the night of their father's murder. She had been drinking at a neighbor's house when they were suddenly attacked by the masked intruder, putting both their lives in grave danger. The girl had woken up from a nightmare only to be ambushed in her own home. Despite her neighbor's desperate attempts to distract the attacker, she couldn't escape his brutality. By the time Jung-woo and Min Hyung arrived, she had suffered deep cuts on her wrists and thighs, with a severe injury to her radial artery. Jung-woo quickly administered first aid and had her rushed to the hospital while instructing Min Hyung to verify his brother, Lee Jin-suk's, whereabouts. Unbeknownst to them, the ambulance carrying the injured girl passed right by him. According to the neighbor's younger sister, the intruder was the same person she had seen the night the girl's father fell from a building. She regretted not arriving sooner, feeling that her delay had contributed to the severity of the girl's injuries. Min Hyung reassured her, praising her bravery for saving the girl's life. From a photo the girl had taken, Min Hyung noticed that she had managed to scratch the attacker's arm during the struggle. Wasting no time, he immediately contacted Jung-woo to assist the forensic team in collecting possible DNA from the crime scene. Hours later, the girl was out of immediate danger, with her vital signs stabilizing. However, the nerve damage in her wrist couldn't be properly treated due to the hospital's lack of facilities. Her only hope was to be transferred to a hospital in a neighboring city. Time was running out, but the doctors believed that Jung-woo, with his specialized skills, could perform the surgery using magnifying glasses instead of a microscope, a technique only he was capable of. Since Jung-woo wasn't a staff doctor at that hospital, he immediately requested an emergency transfer. Meanwhile, Min Hyung noticed tape hanging under the hallway light and speculated that the attacker had set up surveillance to learn the neighbor's door code. He immediately arranged for the team to collect evidence from it. Just then, a junior officer informed Min Hyung that they had tracked the suspect's location via his mobile signal. However, by the time they arrived at the convenience store, the suspect had already fled, keeping them one step behind. While reviewing the surveillance footage, the junior officer questioned why there was such urgency to arrest the suspect just because his phone had been near the crime scene. It seemed unreasonable and didn't align with Min Hyung's usual approach. Min Hyung could only explain that the suspect was his own brother, Jin-suk, the same man responsible for the bride-to-be murder case 7 years ago. The victim had been Jungwoo's fiancé, who had been secretly investigating Jin-suk, suspecting that his hatred for Jung-woo might have driven him to commit the crime. Meanwhile, Jung-woo examined a photo found in Jin-suk's rental and pondered why he had left a note about his whereabouts that day. The next day, the girl who had been in a coma finally regained consciousness. Though in shock, she had lost part of her memory due to the trauma. Min Hyung reassured her not to worry, promising to bring the real culprit to justice. However, their superior was not satisfied with Min Hyung and the junior officer's speculation. Without solid evidence, they couldn't fabricate details. If Jin-suk was truly the perpetrator, why would he hold resentment toward Jung-woo and then target others? Upon learning that Jin-suk was Min Hyung's brother, the meeting concluded with their superior warning Min Hyung to remain professional and not let past convictions cloud his judgment or allow fear for his future to influence his actions. A police officer must have substantial evidence to close a case, or else it becomes a tool for personal vendettas. As a result, the superior decided that Min Hyung would no longer be involved in Jin-suk's case and took responsibility for personally verifying all evidence and forensic findings. Despite this, Min Hyung remained determined to issue a warrant for his brother. Meanwhile, a famous actress suffered an implant displacement due to excessive movement during an action scene, making it difficult for her to walk. She sought Jung-woo's help, and he suggested a simple procedure to reposition the implant beneath the muscle at the original surgical site. Just as Jung-woo was about to leave after answering a phone call, the actress voiced her concerns. He advised her to take time to think it over before making a final decision. Several hours earlier, Jung-woo had asked a lawyer to investigate a leak to understand its connection to his case. He also personally visited Jin-suk's rented cabin, but Jin-suk wasn't home. At that time, Jin-suk was juggling various odd jobs, using his mediocre acting skills to help a casino owner prevent financial losses. He was frequently beaten up in the process, but was paid well. Jin-sik endured it all in order to seek legal representation, having heard that a particular lawyer had recently won a retrial case. Unbeknownst to him, the same lawyer was also investigating him. Shortly after, Jung-woo received an update. The lawyer still couldn't determine why Jin-sik was so desperate for a retrial, but advised Jung-woo to wait until she gathered more information before meeting him. However, the lawyer underestimated Jung-woo's persistence. Unexpectedly, just as Jung-woo was about to leave, he was stopped by the hospital director. A female movie star needed immediate surgery, delaying his plans. After completing the surgery, Jung-woo learned that Jin-sik had already left. The lawyer then informed him that Jin-sik wasn't just angry, he was hiding something. Jung-woo suspected that Jin-sik must have mentioned him during their conversation. Reluctantly, the lawyer revealed what Jin-sik had said. According to him, although he had been disoriented from inhaling a chemical substance, he vaguely remembered seeing someone panicking and fleeing the victim's room. He hadn't been able to see the person's face clearly. However, based on the circumstances, he suspected it had to be someone close to the victim since cases like this often involved crimes of passion. Jung-woo went to the police station to dig deeper into the investigation, unaware that chaos had broken out at the cosmetic clinic after he left. The female movie star suddenly had trouble breathing. Meanwhile, the police tracked down Jin-sik and prepared to arrest him. Jung-woo saw this happening and decided to follow them. The police surrounded an abandoned factory, but once again, they failed to capture their target. However, as Jin-sik tried to escape, Jung-woo managed to stop him. Jung-woo wanted to know why Jin-sik was there, but after 7 years of thinking, Jin-sik still insisted he wasn't the murderer and had no motive. Instead, he was curious about Jung-woo's actions, especially why he was in such a hurry to reveal his identity to the media. He suspected it was all a setup. Jin-sik also recalled that when he entered the room that night, the victim was already lying in a pool of blood. He was sure that someone else had been hiding there, the real killer. Hearing this, Jung-woo started to panic. He realized that the flowers he remembered from that night weren't flowers at all, they were bloodstains. Worse, he was the one who had been hiding at the scene. Overwhelmed, he grabbed Jin-sik by the throat. Then, another image flashed through his mind, his girlfriend, dead in the living room, with him standing there and his hands covered in blood. His mind spiraled, and he became more violent toward Jin-sik. Luckily, Min-hyung arrived just in time to break them apart. Jin-sik was taken back to the police station, where he finally told the full story of what happened that night. He and a friend had been doing drugs in a room when they heard a noise outside. When he opened the door, someone ran away. Seeing that the neighbor's door was open, he stumbled inside only to regret it immediately. There, he found a woman lying dead in a pool of blood. Without thinking, he picked up the murder weapon, leaving him with no way to prove his innocence. Because of this, he was sent to prison as the killer. All he could hope for now was that his sister would believe him and that the real murderer would finally be exposed. Min-hyung started looking through the case files from that year and found several suspicious details, things that no one had questioned before. She contacted the team leader who had handled the case back then to ask about Jung-woo's car accident, but there was no record of it in the files. Whether it was a warning or advice, the team leader told Min-hyung to stop digging into the case, but Min-hyung was determined. Fortunately, not all the news was bad. The real attacker in the case was proven not to be Jin-sik, which led to his release. But Jin-sik wasn't ready to let it go. He decided to continue investigating on his own. One day, while Jung-woo was at a party, he overheard an employee talking about something that happened 7 years ago. She mentioned how she had seen Jung-woo saving someone and admired his courage, which was why she chose to work at his hospital. That same day had also been the day of his girlfriend's incident. When Jung-woo asked her about it, she recalled that he had almost been hit by a car in front of the hospital, but had escaped unharmed. She also remembered seeing him leave in a taxi. However, in Jung-woo's memory, the accident had happened near the hospital, which meant something didn't add up. It made him realize that only one person could have manipulated his memories, his mother. When Jung-woo confronted her, his mother became nervous and emotional. She desperately wanted him to forget the past and stop searching for the truth. She quickly changed the subject and begged him to let it go. But Jung-woo knew he wouldn't get any answers from her, so he left. Meanwhile, Jin-sik, still investigating on his own, suddenly remembered something on the night he entered the crime scene. There had been a watch on the floor. It looked exactly like a watch he had seen before. He rushed home and searched through his belongings. Finally, he found the same watch in his suitcase. The evidence had been with him the whole time. Without wasting time, Jinsuk called Jungwoo and told him to come over immediately. He also planned to contact Min Hyung. He was going to prove to her that Jungwoo was the real murderer. By then, Jinsuk had remembered everything. The person who had fled that night in a panic had been Jungwoo. However, by the time Min Hyung arrived, Jungwoo had already gotten there first. Jinsuk was lying on the ground, his condition unknown. No one had expected that the man who had spent years in prison was actually innocent. To keep the truth hidden, the real killer had even planned to silence him again. When Min Hyung arrived, she found Jungwoo already at the scene, with Jinsuk lying in a pool of blood. Jinsuk was quickly rushed to the hospital, leaving Min Hyung deeply unsettled. She had always refused to believe her brother was a murderer and had been searching for evidence on her own. However, just as she was about to uncover the truth, this incident occurred, proving that Jinsuk had only been a scapegoat. The police arrived to investigate, but found that all evidence had been wiped clean, indicating a premeditated act. With Jungwoo present at the scene, he became the primary suspect. According to Jungwoo, he had just reached the entrance when he saw someone fleeing the scene. He ran inside and found Jinsuk already injured and lying on the floor, with no one else around. The police couldn't determine whether Jungwoo was telling the truth. Fortunately, his lawyer arrived just in time, with crucial evidence and audio recording of Jinsuk's call that night, proving that someone else had been present. As a result, Jungwoo was temporarily released. As he left, he encountered the head of the investigation team, who strangely advised him not to take Jinsuk's words seriously, dismissing the evidence as mere provocation. Determined to uncover the truth, Min Hyung returned to the scene. If Jungwoo was telling the truth, then the real culprit must have escaped through another route. As she looked down, she noticed a shadow moving below it was Jungwoo, also searching for clues to clear his name. Sure enough, she discovered blood on a piece of protruding metal nearby. Without hesitation, she collected a sample and took it to the police station for analysis. However, before the results could be released, the team leader used the excuse of her being related to the suspect to remove her from the case. Despite the ban, Min Hyung continued investigating. While reviewing the surveillance footage from that night, she spotted a familiar figure interfering with her case. It was the team leader. Determined to expose him, Min Hyung went straight to the team leader's desk and noticed a toothbrush in his cup. Acting quickly, she took it for forensic testing. When the results came back, they confirmed that the DNA matched the blood found at the scene. By then, the team leader had already visited Jinsuk's hospital room, subtly inquiring about his condition. When he learned that Jinsuk was about to wake up, a flash of panic crossed his face. Making an excuse, he sent Jinsuk's mother away and turned to look at Jinsuk lying on the hospital bed. Memories of that night resurfaced in his mind. When he had arrived at Jinsuk's home that night, Jinsuk had immediately declared that he had found evidence that would make the team leader pay for his past crimes. Realizing his downfall was imminent, the team leader's eyes landed on a fire extinguisher in the corner, and a dark thought crossed his mind. He slowly shut the door. Moments later, Jinsuk's screams echoed from the room. As Jinsuk lay in his hospital bed, the team leader moved to disconnect his oxygen mask, ensuring he would never wake up. Just then, Jungwoo suddenly appeared at the door, stopping him. Rolling up his sleeve, Jungwoo revealed a wound he had gotten in a panicked escape that night. The team leader attempted to flee, but Min Hyung was already waiting for him downstairs. With solid evidence against him, he had no way out. However, to everyone's shock, he only admitted to forcing Jinsuk to confess years ago. The real killer of Jungwoo's fiancée was still out there. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, a young woman was about to undergo surgery. A horrifying realization dawned on her. The doctor preparing to operate on her was the same man who had tried to kill her recently. Before she could scream for help, the anesthesia took effect, and she quickly lost consciousness. In her unconscious state, she relived the terrifying night, sinking deeper into despair. When she suddenly awoke from the nightmare, her mind held a much clearer image of the murderer. Wasting no time, she grabbed a notebook from the cabinet and started sketching his face. As she drew, a pair of sharp, determined eyes emerged on the paper. She then picked up her phone and searched through the hospital's list of doctors. After comparing the faces, she was certain she hadn't been mistaken. Panic surged through her. Clutching the notebook, she rushed out of the room. But before she could get far, She sensed someone approaching. A shadowy figure was closing in. She quickly ducked into a nearby room, holding her breath as the doctor glanced inside. Luckily, he didn't notice her, but as he stepped into the empty space, he realized something was wrong. The girl had disappeared. Hearing the faint noise, he immediately guessed that his identity had been exposed and took off in pursuit. She had reached the stairwell and was heading down as fast as she could, while the doctor chased her relentlessly. As she glanced back, their eyes locked, filling her with terror. She ran even faster, but he wasn't far behind. The commotion caught Jung's attention. As he watched the doctor charging down the stairs, he froze. Sudden flashes of blurry memories overwhelmed his mind. As the girl reached the ground floor, the footsteps behind her grew louder. With no other option, she slipped into a storage room to hide. Moments later, Dr. Park appeared at the door, ready to open it. She shut her eyes tightly, bracing for the worst. Meanwhile, the man had wanted the woman to leave with him, but during a heated argument, he unintentionally let go of her hand. She stumbled backward, hitting the corner of a table and immediately losing consciousness from the impact. Dr. Park, seeing her collapse, panicked and fled the scene. It wasn't until later that evening that the woman finally regained consciousness. Due to excessive blood loss, she was too weak to stand, so she slowly crawled toward her phone. After struggling for a while, she managed to call her boyfriend, Jung-woo. Sensing something was wrong, Jung-woo frantically called out her name, but there was no response. Just then, Dr. Park returned, grabbed the phone from her, and hung up the moment he heard Jung's voice. Looking down at the woman lying on the floor, a horrifying thought crossed his mind. By the time Jung-woo arrived, he found his girlfriend lifeless, covered in blood. In his rush, his watch slipped from his pocket. That's when he noticed a figure lurking in the corner. As the person attempted to escape, Jung-woo chased after him and managed to pull off his mask only to discover it was his best friend. Jung-woo pursued Dr. Park, but before he could catch him, he got into a car accident, erasing his memory of the event. Now, as he stood in the stairwell and heard noises, watching Dr. Park descend, his memories suddenly came flooding back. At the same time, the girl who had been hiding in the storage room held her breath as Dr. Park reached for the door. Just then, a security guard appeared, making Dr. Park hesitate before quickly walking away. This gave the girl the chance to escape. When Jung-woo arrived and saw her terrified expression along with the sketches she had made, his suspicions were confirmed. He immediately took her to the police station, entrusting her safety to Min-hyung. Without wasting time, he got into his car and set out to track down Dr. Park. Meanwhile, Dr. Park was inside the fencing club storage room, getting rid of the tools he had used in his crimes. As he sorted through them, memories of the past surfaced, specifically the death of the girl's father. He had once offered to operate on the man, but instead of gratitude, he was met with ridicule. That night, after being rejected again, Dr. Park had gone to the man's home. In a fit of rage, he strangled him and pushed him off the balcony. Despite everything, Dr. Park still believed that Jung-woo was ultimately to blame for it all. Snapping back to reality, he grabbed his things and left just as Jung-woo arrived. Without hesitation, Jung-woo picked up a nearby sword and attacked Dr. Park, causing his belongings to scatter across the floor. At that moment, Jung-woo was certain Dr. Park was the real killer. He grabbed him by the collar and backed him into a corner. But to his surprise, Dr. Park revealed something shocking. All of this had been orchestrated by Jung's mother. She had disapproved of his relationship and secretly hired someone to eliminate his girlfriend. Dr. Park had uncovered this plot and had gone to warn the woman that night, trying to convince her to leave. He then tossed some photos to Jung-woo before walking away. Soon after, he infiltrated Jung's mother's company, using her phone to call Jung-woo and luring him to the hospital. When Jung-woo arrived, he found his mother strapped to an operating table, unable to move. Dr. Park picked up a scalpel and pretended to stab her. Blood splattered onto her face, but it wasn't real. He had merely burst a blood pack, then wildly smeared it on her to stage a murder scene. His goal was clear. He wanted Jung-woo, who was rushing to the scene, to believe he had killed his own mother. This way, Dr. Park could end his own life while framing Jung-woo as a murderer. Overcome with fury, Jung-woo grabbed a scalpel, ready to kill Dr. Park, but just before he struck, flashes of past memories calmed him down. This wasn't the way. Dr. Park, realizing his plan had failed, and there was no escape, made a desperate decision. He shoved Jung's knife into his own throat. Min-hyung rushed in to stop him, but it was too late. Despite everything, Jung-woo refused to give up. Fortunately, they were in an operating room. Thanks to Jung-woo's quick actions, Dr. Park survived, though now he would have to face the consequences of his crimes. On the day Jung-woo visited Dr. Park in prison, he asked him why he had saved him. Dr. Park, who had always insisted his girlfriend's death was an accident, was confronted with the truth. Jung-woo revealed photos taken after her death, proving she hadn't died immediately from the fall. Instead, she had been strangled afterward. The knife wounds on her body had only been inflicted later to cover the marks around her neck. Dr. Park had mistaken her for Jung-woo that night. His refusal to acknowledge the truth wasn't just denial, it was his escape from reality. After their meeting, Dr. Park stared at his reflection in the mirror. He couldn't recognize the person he had become. But despite the undeniable truth, he refused to change his stance. He would remain trapped in his own delusions forever. With the real culprit finally captured, Jin-suk, who had been wrongfully accused for 7 years, was finally exonerated, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. Now, he could finally reclaim the life that had been stolen from him. As for Jung-woo, he was slowly emerging from his pain. Every now and then, he found himself smiling again. A new chapter in his life was about to begin.